Silence has often been misunderstood. Many associate it with weakness, passivity, or absence. Yet silence is not an empty state. It is not the void where nothing happens. It is, in truth, one of the greatest sources of inner strength a human being can cultivate. Silence is where thoughts settle, where emotions lose their turbulence, and where clarity begins to emerge. In a world that constantly demands reaction, noise, and expression, silence becomes a radical choice, a decision to anchor oneself in stillness rather than be pulled into the chaos of distraction. The strength of silence does not lie in withdrawal from life. It lies in its ability to give space between impulse and action, between emotion and response. When silence enters a person, their words and actions gain weight because they are no longer reactions but considered responses. The one who has mastered silence does not need to shout to be heard. Their presence itself communicates. Their restraint itself commands respect. Inner silence becomes the foundation for self-mastery, for without it, the mind is constantly entangled in noise, pulled in 1,000 directions, unable to act with purpose. In silence, the ego has fewer places to hide. The mind, when left without external stimulation, begins to reveal its patterns. The chatter that usually goes unnoticed suddenly becomes audible. And it is in this confrontation that strength is built. To sit with silence is to face oneself. It is to witness all the thoughts, fears, and memories that normally get drowned out by the busyness of daily life. At first, this confrontation can be uncomfortable, even frightening. Yet it is precisely here where inner power begins. Strength does not emerge from running away from discomfort. It emerges from the willingness to sit within it, to observe it, and to let it dissolve in silence. Silence has another dimension that reveals its strength. It sharpens perception. When the mind is silent, it stops projecting its noise onto the world. The senses begin to pick up subtleties that were always there but drowned out by internal dialogue. A quiet mind hears more, sees more, understands more. It is not distracted by the endless commentary of judgment and comparison. Instead, it becomes like a mirror, reflecting reality as it is. Such clarity is strength because it allows one to act with precision instead of confusion. The strongest warrior is not the one who swings wildly, but the one who observes, waits, and moves only when necessary. In human interaction, silence becomes an invisible force. Most people seek to fill every gap in conversation, fearing that silence signals discomfort or weakness. But the one who rests comfortably in silence holds an advantage. They are not rushed, not pressured to react, not manipulated by the need to speak. Silence gives space for deeper listening, and deeper listening builds deeper understanding. Strength lies not in always speaking, but in knowing when words are unnecessary. Sometimes silence itself carries the message that words cannot express. The practice of silence also disciplines desire. Modern life thrives on constant stimulation, sounds, images, notifications, and noise. To withdraw into silence is to reclaim sovereignty over one's attention. It is to declare that the mind is not a slave to external demands. This discipline strengthens the will. When one can resist the urge to always react, to always consume, to always speak, they discover freedom. And freedom is the foundation of strength. For the one who is free within cannot be shaken by the noise outside. Silence is not merely the absence of sound, but the presence of stillness. It is not about shutting out the world, but about tuning into a deeper frequency. There is a silence beneath every sound, a stillness beneath every movement. To access it is to align with something beyond the restless activity of the surface mind. And from this alignment comes resilience, patience, and an unshakable core. Storms may rage, but silence remains. This is why silence is strength. It does not resist the storm, it simply exists beyond it. When silence becomes part of one's life, energy that was once scattered begins to consolidate. Thoughts that once drained vitality dissolve. Emotions that once consumed focus settle. This collected energy becomes inner power. Instead of being wasted on unnecessary conflicts, endless chatter, and constant distraction, it becomes available for meaningful creation, for purposeful action. The silent person does not live less, they live more deeply. Their energy is not diluted, it is concentrated. Many seek strength through control of others, through displays of dominance, through accumulation of external markers of power. Yet all of these are fragile. They depend on circumstances, on recognition, on external validation. The strength of silence, however, depends on nothing outside. It is rooted within, untouchable by circumstance. It does not need to be proven. It simply exists. The quiet person may not appear powerful at first glance, but when challenges arise, their stillness reveals itself as unshakable strength. The discipline of silence is not achieved overnight. It requires practice, patience, and persistence. It means learning to be comfortable with emptiness, to sit without distraction, to resist the urge to constantly fill the air with sound. It means observing one's thoughts without chasing them, allowing them to pass like clouds across the sky. Over time, this practice builds a reservoir of calm that becomes available even in the midst of chaos. Silence cultivated in solitude carries over into action, into relationships, into every moment of living. To embody silence is to discover an inner fortress, a strength that does not crumble when tested. It is the strength of presence, the strength of patience, the strength of clarity, and the strength of freedom. This strength does not need to announce itself, for it is not dependent on recognition. It radiates quietly, influencing without effort, commanding without force, and persisting without noise. There is a force within every human being that cannot be captured by the tongue or confined to sentences. Long before the mouth opens to speak, long before language is shaped by the mind, there is already a vibration present. This vibration is the energy you carry, and it speaks louder, clearer, and more truthfully than any words could. When people come close to you, they may not even be aware of it consciously, yet they feel something. They sense your presence. They feel whether you are heavy with worry, radiant with calm, restless with anxiety, or steady with strength. That is energy in its purest expression, and it communicates silently to the world around you. Words can be deceptive, polished, and constructed to project an image. Energy cannot be so easily disguised. If the inside is in conflict, no matter how eloquent the speech, there is a subtle disturbance in the way it is received. The body reveals what the tongue tries to hide. The tone, the rhythm of breathing, the way the eyes move, the way the shoulders rise and fall, all are reflections of inner energy, and they reveal far more than the carefully chosen syllables we release into the air. Energy has no nationality, no translation problem, no barrier between cultures. Two people who cannot speak the same language can still understand each other through this vibration. A kind gaze, a calm presence, a grounded stance, these are forms of communication that bypass the intellect and speak directly to the heart. Just as one can walk into a room and instantly feel whether it is filled with tension or harmony, one can encounter another human and sense their inner weather before a single word is spoken. When you cultivate inner clarity, others feel it. When you nurture calmness within, it radiates outward like heat from a fire. People who sit near you may not know why, but they feel a sense of peace. The same is true with unrest. If you carry resentment or anger inside, that frequency leaks into every gesture, into every silence, into every pause between words. This is why mastering energy is far more important than mastering language. Words may influence the ear, but energy shapes the entire atmosphere. Consider nature. The sun does not speak, yet everything responds to it. Plants turn toward it, animals bask in it. Human beings are uplifted by its presence. A river does not need to explain itself, yet it teaches patience, flow, and persistence without uttering a sound. Mountains do not use vocabulary, yet they convey stability, endurance, and immovable strength. Their energy communicates constantly, silently, powerfully. In the same way, a human being who has refined their inner energy becomes a message, a teaching, a presence that speaks without sound. To understand this, you must look inward. What is the energy you radiate daily? Do you carry heaviness that makes others feel drained, or do you carry lightness that allows others to feel lifted? When you enter a space, do you disturb it with restlessness, or do you balance it with stillness? These are questions of energy, and they require no words to answer. The body, the presence, the unspoken frequency already speaks on your behalf. The mind often believes that speaking more, explaining more, justifying more will create understanding. Yet true understanding is born from resonance, not from reasoning. A teacher may share countless words, but if their energy is not aligned with their message, the listener feels the contradiction. On the other hand, a few words spoken from a state of deep inner alignment can penetrate directly into the heart. This is why silence, when filled with authentic presence, can sometimes be more transformative than hours of explanation. Energy also determines the strength of your actions. Two people may perform the same gesture, yet one radiates sincerity, while the other radiates emptiness. The gesture is identical, but the impact is not. It is not the outward movement alone that matters, but the energy fueling it. A smile given from genuine joy carries healing. A smile given as a mask carries hollowness. Both may look the same, but the vibration behind them is worlds apart. The cultivation of energy requires discipline. It is not something left to chance. Just as one trains the body to be strong, one must train the energy to be refined. Breathing deeply, calming the mind, moving the body with awareness, these practices align the flow of energy so that what radiates outward is coherent and steady. Without this discipline, energy becomes fragmented, scattered and unstable, and such energy confuses both the self and others. In relationships, energy determines trust more than promises. A person may declare loyalty with words, but if their energy wavers with dishonesty, the heart perceives it. A person may remain silent, yet their steady presence communicates reliability more convincingly than oaths or speeches. In this way, energy builds or destroys trust before words even have the chance to operate. Even in solitude, energy speaks. The way you carry yourself when no one is watching, the way you breathe when the world is silent, the way your thoughts settle when you are alone. These are all signals of your state. And this state does not remain hidden. It travels with you into your relationships, into your work, into your very movements. The quality of your solitude becomes the quality of your presence among others. To live with awareness of energy is to realize that every moment communicates. Every gesture, every silence, every pause is a form of speaking. The energy you cultivate is the most honest language you possess, for it cannot be polished or pretended. It is always authentic, whether scattered or refined, heavy or light, restless or calm. Silence is often mistaken as emptiness, as if nothing is happening within it, but in truth, silence is one of the most fertile grounds for inner growth. When the mind is full of noise, when thoughts run endlessly without pause, there is little room for clarity to arise. Silence creates space, and within that space the seeds of awareness, understanding and transformation begin to grow. In silence, the unnecessary begins to dissolve and the essential starts to reveal itself. When we are surrounded by constant stimulation, we are being pulled in countless directions. The phone rings, messages arrive, voices speak, screens flash. In this environment, the mind becomes restless, unable to hear its own depth. But when silence is invited, a shift takes place. The external world continues, but within us there is space that allows observation, that allows breath, that allows the simple presence of being. This space does not come from doing more, but from doing less. It does not arrive from trying harder, but from loosening the grip. Silence itself becomes a practice, a discipline that transforms not by adding anything, but by removing the clutter that blocks what is already there. In silence, emotions are not immediately reacted to, but are allowed to settle. Imagine water in a jar filled with sand. If you keep shaking it, the water stays cloudy and you cannot see clearly. But the moment the jar is placed still, the sand falls to the bottom and the water becomes clear. Silence works the same way for the mind. It lets the turbulence settle, and in that settling, clarity emerges. You begin to see the root of your thoughts, the origin of your emotions, the depth of your own patterns. Without silence, everything remains stirred and chaotic, but with silence, the space to observe without judgment opens up. This space does not mean an absence of thought, it means a change in relationship with thought. Normally, thoughts appear and immediately pull us into reaction. One thought leads to another, and soon the mind is lost in a chain of endless dialogue. But in silence, the thought can be seen as simply a thought. It arises, it passes, and you remain still. This stillness is power, because it is the position from which you are no longer controlled by every impulse, every fear, every desire. You see them come, you see them go, but you remain in the space that silence creates. In silence, creativity also awakens. It may seem paradoxical, but it is when we stop forcing solutions, when we step away from the noise of constant problem solving, that the mind begins to connect dots in unexpected ways. Silence opens the door to intuition. It gives permission for insights to arise that cannot be reached by logical effort alone. The greatest ideas often come in moments of quiet, not in moments of noise. This is why silence has always been central in spiritual practice, in meditation, in the search for wisdom. Without silence, wisdom has no place to land. When silence is cultivated, relationships also begin to shift. Much of communication is filled with unnecessary words, spoken not to connect, but to fill the fear of quiet. But when one is comfortable in silence, Presence itself becomes communication. A look, a breath, an unspoken understanding carries more weight than 1,000 words. Silence teaches us to listen, not only to others but to the life within them, to the tone beneath the words, to the intention behind the actions. Listening deeply requires space, and silence provides it. Silence also reveals strength. To be silent is not to be weak, but to trust that not everything requires a reaction, not every opinion needs a response, not every challenge needs immediate defense. It is restraint, patience, and self-mastery. The space of silence allows the moment to breathe, and in that breath, wisdom can choose the right action instead of a reactive one. Silence holds power because it contains potential. Noise is expended energy, but silence is stored energy, waiting to be directed with precision. In a noisy world, silence can feel uncomfortable. It may feel unnatural to sit without distraction, to walk without music, to eat without a screen, to simply be. Yet it is in this discomfort that transformation begins. To endure silence is to endure oneself, and to endure oneself is to begin to truly know oneself. Silence creates the space where identity is stripped of external validation, where you are not defined by what you do, say, or show, but by the awareness that remains when all else is quiet. Silence creates space, and in that space the body finds rest, the mind finds clarity, the heart finds balance, and the spirit finds depth. It is not about withdrawing from life, but entering life more fully, without distraction, without distortion. In silence, the moment reveals itself exactly as it is, and in that revelation, the essence of life is experienced directly, without interference, without the filter of noise. Restraint is often misunderstood in today's world. Many see it as suppression, as holding back desires, or denying oneself the pleasures of life. But restraint in its truest form is not about suffocating the self. It is about directing energy with awareness. Discipline is not punishment. It is a conscious act of choosing where one's strength flows, and restraint is its reflection. Without restraint, discipline cannot exist. For discipline is born from the ability to pause, to hold, to redirect, rather than to scatter energy without purpose. When we practice restraint, we begin to realize that not every impulse requires action. Not every thought deserves expression. Not every emotion needs to spill into the world. Restraint creates space between the stimulus and our response. And in that space, wisdom is born. The untrained mind reacts, the disciplined mind responds. The difference may appear small, but it defines the quality of our lives. Restraint allows one to recognize the strength of patience. In the moment when anger rises, restraint gives us the power not to lash out. In the moment when desire consumes us, restraint gives us the clarity to see if it truly serves us. In the moment when fear grips, restraint teaches us to breathe rather than to run. Each act of restraint is not weakness, it is mastery. It is saying, I am not controlled by the outside, I am guided from within. Discipline is not visible in loud declarations or in dramatic acts. It is revealed in the quiet consistency of restraint. A disciplined person is not one who has conquered the world, but one who has learned to govern themselves. When you practice restraint, you begin to see discipline not as chains, but as freedom. The freedom to no longer be a servant to your impulses, the freedom to stand firm in the midst of chaos, the freedom to know that you are not a leaf blowing in the winds of emotion, but a rooted tree with deep foundations. Restraint reflects discipline in the way water reflects the moon. The surface of the water must be calm for the reflection to be clear. The mind must be steady for discipline to shine through. If the water is restless, the reflection is distorted. If the mind is restless, the true strength of discipline cannot appear. Restraint is the practice of calming those waves, of quieting the turbulence, so that the inner clarity can rise and reveal itself. Restraint also teaches the art of timing. A person without restraint may act too soon, may speak too fast, may spend too much, may burn out their energy before the moment requires it. A disciplined person knows that timing is everything. Restraint is not refusal, it is postponement until the right alignment arises. Just as a seed does not sprout in winter but waits for the warmth of spring, restraint allows actions to unfold in harmony with the right time. In physical training, restraint is visible when one does not push recklessly, but holds energy for the next round, the next challenge. In meditation, restraint is the act of returning again and again to the breath, resisting the temptation to chase every thought. In speech, restraint is the ability to listen more than speak, to weigh words carefully, to realize that silence often speaks louder than noise. Restraint is the mirror in which discipline shows its true form. Restraint is also an acknowledgement of limits. Discipline is not about endless endurance or denying the human nature, but about knowing when enough is enough. Restraint is the voice that says stop before excess consumes you, pause before words turn into regret, hold before actions lead to destruction. To live with restraint is to respect the limits of the body, the rhythms of the mind, the flow of life. It is not to starve joy, but to prevent indulgence from turning joy into suffering. In the discipline of martial arts, restraint is visible when the practitioner does not unleash all force at once, but conserves channels and directs it with precision. A strike without restraint is wild, but a strike with restraint carries the weight of true discipline. In life, restraint transforms raw energy into refined power, scattered motion into focused action, chaos into balance. Restraint also cultivates humility. To restrain oneself is to acknowledge that the ego is not the master of all. Discipline grows when one can step back, when one does not need to prove, when one does not need to dominate. Restraint is the silence that allows others to be heard, the stillness that allows the truth to surface. In this humility, discipline finds its deepest strength. Restraint reflects discipline in the simplest daily acts. Choosing not to overindulge in food is restraint. Choosing not to spend hours lost in distraction is restraint. Choosing not to respond in anger, choosing to remain calm when provoked, choosing to persist when it is easier to quit. All of these are reflections of discipline. Discipline is not one great act, but thousands of small acts of restraint repeated until they become the natural way of being. The world often praises freedom without boundaries, but freedom without restraint easily becomes an enslavement to desire, to impulse, to restlessness. True freedom comes through discipline, and discipline is seen in restraint. The one who can restrain themselves is not bound, but liberated. For they are no longer pulled in every direction by the mind's endless cravings, but are guided by clarity, by intention, by awareness. Restraint is not weakness, it is strength turned inward. It is the recognition that true mastery is not in conquering others, but in mastering the self. It is the discipline of holding when the world tells you to rush, of pausing when the ego tells you to prove, of listening when the impulse tells you to speak. And with each act of restraint, the discipline deepens, the power grows, the presence strengthens, until restraint itself becomes a natural state of being, not forced, not rigid, but fluid, balanced. A life often reveals itself most clearly not in what is constant, but in what stands in opposition. The principle of contrast teaches that we understand value through difference, that we perceive beauty because of ugliness, that we recognize light because of darkness. Without contrast, existence would blur into uniformity, and meaning would dissolve into an endless sameness. To live with awareness is to recognize that contrast is not an enemy of peace, but a teacher of clarity. Think of night and day. If there were only constant daylight, the radiance of the sun would become invisible to us. Its warmth would no longer feel like a gift, but like an unnoticed background. It is the arrival of night, with its cool darkness, that makes the morning glow of sunlight appear as something new, refreshing, and necessary. The contrast between dark and light awakens us to appreciation. In this way, life continually invites us to experience gratitude through the movement of opposites. The same is true in our personal journeys. We know joy only because we have tasted sorrow. We value health because illness has at times reminded us of its fragility. Strength is recognized only after weakness has revealed itself. If we try to remove struggle from life, we would also remove the very conditions that allow us to recognize growth. The human mind often wishes for ease and comfort, but the human spirit is nourished by challenge and by the discovery of what lies on the other side of contrast. In relationships, too, the contrast principle is always present. It is often through meeting those who misunderstand us that we come to cherish those rare moments of true understanding. By encountering dishonesty, we deepen our reverence for honesty. When we feel the sting of disconnection, we become more attuned to the gift of genuine connection. Contrast shapes our awareness of what is essential. It sharpens perception by drawing boundaries between what uplifts and what diminishes, between what aligns and what distracts. The mind itself is subject to this principle. Without silence, we would never recognize noise. Without stillness, motion would go unnoticed. Without confusion, clarity would hold no meaning. Our inner landscape is textured by contrasts that create opportunities for self-discovery. Frustration awakens patience. Fear calls forth courage. Doubt becomes the ground from which trust can grow. The mind resists these opposites, longing for harmony without disturbance, but it is precisely the interplay of opposites that awakens the depth of human consciousness. Even in the training of the body, the principle reveals itself. Muscles grow not from rest alone, but from the alternating rhythm of tension and release, strain and recovery. If one only rested, weakness would set in. If one only strained, exhaustion would break the body down. It is the contrast between these states that allows balance and strength to emerge. The wisdom of nature shows us that all growth depends on cycles of opposition, on the dance between effort and surrender. In the realm of time, the same principle unfolds. The fleetingness of youth is felt more sharply because of aging. Opportunities feel precious precisely because they do not last forever. The temporary nature of life seasons creates a profound awareness of presence. If everything lasted eternally in its current form, we would cease to notice its beauty. Transience gives meaning because it draws contrast between what is now and what will no longer be. The contrast principle also shapes the pursuit of wisdom. Ignorance is not simply a lack of knowledge. It is the necessary backdrop against which knowledge reveals its significance. When we look back at earlier stages of our journey, we often see the mistakes, the misunderstandings, the blind spots. These become the ground against which our current understanding shines. Wisdom cannot be inherited without contrast. It must be lived through, discovered by moving from one side of experience to the other. This principle can even be observed in the natural order. Mountains are defined by the valleys that surround them. Rivers exist only in contrast to the land they carve through. The sky reveals its vastness through the presence of clouds. Life is not a collection of isolated phenomena, but a continuous interaction of contrasts that give shape to existence. The world itself whispers this lesson at every moment, yet it is often overlooked because we seek only what is pleasant, only what confirms our desires. When we begin to see contrast not as conflict, but as complement, a shift occurs in perception. The discomfort we feel in moments of hardship no longer appears as punishment, but as the necessary shade against which the next light will be seen. The resistance we encounter in life ceases to feel like an obstruction and instead becomes a sculptor shaping the contours of our being. By observing contrast, we develop patience. By accepting contrast, we gain resilience. By embracing contrast, we move closer to balance. The principle of contrast does not ask us to glorify pain or to seek difficulty, but to understand their place in the whole. It reminds us that life's richness is woven from differences, that meaning arises not from singularity, but from relationship. If we eliminate opposition, we eliminate the possibility of recognition. Contrast creates edges, and edges create form, and form gives rise to awareness. Through this principle, existence becomes visible, and through visibility, the path of understanding unfolds. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of awareness. When we allow ourselves to sit in silence, without distraction, without the constant need to fill the air with words or thoughts, something extraordinary happens. We begin to see what is hidden beneath the noise. Silence does not give us answers in spoken form, yet it reveals truths that words could never capture. It is a mirror, showing us the raw reflection of our inner state. The reason silence is so powerful is because it strips away illusions. In daily life, we cloak ourselves with activities, conversations, and endless streams of information. All of these are like masks, layers covering what is truly within. But when you remove these coverings and face silence, you come face to face with yourself. Silence has no judgment, no filter, no agenda. It simply reflects back the reality of who you are in that moment. Sometimes the reflection is beautiful, filled with calm and clarity. At other times, it can be unsettling because silence reveals the turmoil, the unresolved emotions, the restless mind we carry. This is why many people avoid silence. To sit quietly feels uncomfortable because in the stillness, the mirror becomes clear. The distractions fall away, and suddenly the truth of our condition is visible. Silence reveals the way we talk to ourselves when no one else is around. It reflects the depth of our fears, the weight of our desires, and the patterns of our thinking. In silence, we cannot escape into noise or movement. We must acknowledge what is there. But if we are courageous enough to face this mirror, then silence becomes not just a reflection, but a teacher. When you practice sitting in silence, you begin to notice the layers of your own being. At first, there is restlessness, the urge to move, to grab your phone, to find some stimulus. If you stay, you notice the constant stream of thoughts, ideas jumping from one place to another. If you stay even longer, you start to notice the emotions behind those thoughts, subtle feelings of anxiety, longing, joy, or sadness. And if you go even deeper, silence brings you to a place where you no longer identify with any of these. The mirror shows not only the waves on the surface, but also the still water underneath. This is the true gift of silence. It reveals the depth that exists beneath the constant activity of the mind. Silence also shows us how much we project outward. In conversation, in arguments, in relationships, we are always projecting parts of ourselves onto others. But when we turn inward, silence reflects those same projections back at us. It shows how often our judgments of others are really judgments of ourselves. It shows how much of our dissatisfaction with the outside world comes from unresolved patterns within. Silence, like a mirror, does not accuse, it only reflects. But what it shows us can be transformative if we are willing to see clearly. The mirror of silence is also where true strength is cultivated. Many believe that power comes from controlling others, from influence, from action in the external world. But the deepest power is the ability to see oneself clearly and not turn away. Silence gives us this discipline. To sit in stillness is not a passive act. It is an act of courage. It requires strength to face the unfiltered reflection of the self, without distraction, without excuses. Over time, this practice builds inner resilience. You begin to see that the storms of thought and emotion are temporary, just passing clouds on the mirror's surface. Beneath them lies a steady clarity, a strength that cannot be shaken by circumstance. When silence becomes your mirror, you also learn the art of listening. Not just listening to others, but listening to life itself. Every sound, every movement, every breath becomes clear when the mind is quiet. You begin to notice the subtle rhythms of existence that were drowned out by noise before. This heightened perception makes you more present, more alive. The mirror of silence reflects not just your inner world, but also the interconnectedness of everything around you. In this awareness, you realize that the boundaries between self and world are thinner than you thought. Silence also reveals how little we need to be whole. In noise, we constantly seek something, entertainment, validation, escape. But in silence, you discover that nothing is missing. The mirror shows that peace is not found in addition, but in subtraction. By removing distractions, you see that clarity, contentment, and presence are already within you. This realization changes the way you engage with the world. Instead of seeking to fill an inner void, you act from a place of wholeness. The mirror of silence can sometimes reveal painful truths, old wounds, regrets, insecurities. But this is part of its power. Without reflection, these remain hidden, festering in the unconscious. Silence brings them into awareness, where they can be acknowledged and released. In this way, silence is both a mirror and a healer. It does not fix you, but it shows you what needs attention. By looking honestly at the reflection, you give yourself the opportunity to transform. The deeper you go into silence, the more the mirror reveals. At first, it reflects the mind, then the emotions, then the deeper patterns of the self. But if you stay long enough, the mirror begins to dissolve. What you see is not a separate self at all, but pure awareness, the space in which everything arises. This is the ultimate reflection, that you are not the noise, not the thoughts, not even the personality you thought you were. Silence shows that you are the awareness in which all of these come and go.